Welcome in, everyone. This is Sean with MTG808 Jr., and I've got Mike here with me today.
How's it?
And we are going to recap Saturday, right?
Yes.
Last Saturday's Youth Standard Pauper Tournament over at Miniq. We had 8 players.
8 players.
And we are going to be looking at our top 4 deck lists today. It seems like the metagame has kind of solidified.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of a small pool of players, and they've all kind of been playing the same decks for quite some time, but we're starting to see lists really solidify. We're starting to see the same lists continue to have success, maybe with just slight tweaks here and there. But we had Jansen coming in first, JP coming in second. It was a bit of a titanic brawl there in the finals. And then Skylar in third and Sydney in fourth. And they were playing identical mono-white aggro decks. Okay, so we're going to jump into those deck lists, but first, don't forget about our scholarship tournament coming up December 14th over at Dirtle Zone. $750 in scholarship prize. That's $250 to second, $500 to first, $5 to enter, and it is Standard Pauper with Throne of Eldraine being the most recent set. So it'll be a very explored format by then. I expect people to come with very tuned decks. So if you're planning on playing, you're in the right place to find out the secret tech. Prior to that, we've got a couple of events scheduled. Our next tournament is going to be November 3rd over at Westside Comics at their new location in IAEA. It looks like their Facebook page does reflect the new address, so I'm not sure if Google Maps has it updated yet, but the Facebook address is correct, so check us out over at Westside Games. Sunday, November 3rd, doors open at 10 a.m., tournament starts at 10:30. And then the next tournament we have scheduled is November 9th over at The Planet. This one is tentative right now. We may need to reschedule this. We got to figure out our schedules to see if we can for sure run this. But right now, the next tournament scheduled is November 9th. Again, Standard Pauper, doors open at 1, tournament starts at 1:30 over at The Planet in town. And then, of course, if you want to support what we do, thank you for watching our videos. Hopefully you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Great way to support us. If you want to go above and beyond, check out our Patreon page. We would not be able to run these tournaments, much less give away scholarship prizes to our wonderful competitors if we did not have support from our loyal patrons. So check out the Patreon page. You can get some perks, get a little closer look at how we're spending our money, what we're doing, and it'll go towards a good cause. So check it out. Okay, so Jansen, blue-black mid-range, took down the tournament. JP, mono-green aggro, second, and then identical mono-white aggro lists in third and fourth. So let's start here with mono-white aggro.
I think looking half the field was white aggro. So there's 3 people running mono white aggro, 1 person running Boros aggro. So that's red white aggro.
Yeah, and we saw Skylar make top 4 of the previous tournament using the same exact list, and it looks like Sydney just picked up his exact 75 and ran it to some success. So white aggro, 12 1-drops, 8 2-drops, Tactician really solidifying itself as the 3-drop of choice here, and then Parhelion Patrol on top of the curve. I really like how Idyllic Grange and Marauder's Axe play well with Parhelion Patrol. Same with Fairy Guide Mother. In terms of innovation, I'm not sure how many other options there are to explore. I was just commenting, I'm surprised that there's 0 copies of God's Willing in these lists. I think that's a really powerful card, but where since it doesn't punch through, it doesn't punch through a bigger blocker, then maybe the decks just want to have the pump spells instead of the protection spell. The other 2-drop that I think may find its way into rotation, I just think that it hasn't been tested out yet, is Silverflame Squire. I think Daybreak Chaplain plays well with, blocking the lifelink plan. Parhelion Patrol can mentor onto it. But I think that because the deck values the pump spells so much, maybe Silver Flame Squire is going to find a home. The fact that the adventure is a pump spell that not only it's a little expensive, but it untaps the creature, so it helps you win races, and it is an instant, right? Yeah. So unlike Fairy Guidemother's pump ability, so something that mono white players can keep on their radar. But I mean, this is also just the tried and true deck list. So
I'm shocked that no one's playing Flutterfox.
Flutterfox, yeah. Well,
but then of course you have
Pacifism and Marauder's Axe are the only thing that would give it flying. So maybe, yeah, if there was like one more artifact or enchantment that was worth playing, then I could see Flutterfox being the go-to 2-drop. But I think Silver Flame Squire is worth considering. Their sideboard is very solid. Battalion Foot Soldier and Raise the Alarm help them go wide against the control decks. Divine Arrow, extra removal for the aggro mirrors, and then Disenchant, I guess.
To answer any opposing pacifist.
Yeah, or other equipment. So, solid streamlined sideboard. I would not fault anyone for bringing this 75 to the Scholarship Tournament. I can imagine that it is very solid. Okay, so that was Sydney and Skylar. They both had the same deck list. Coming in second place was JP's mono green deck, which is also the same 75 that Mr. Ulip used in the end boss match. So some innovation here. We see Rosethorn Halberd being included in the deck. How is that on the day?
Yeah. I really like how JP just starts. He uses it on the Leaf Conduit. So like from what he was able to do with it, I think the worst is when he's attaching it to the Arlen's Wolf, especially in the aggro matchups. Yeah. It's just like, how do you, like, it's just going in for 5 each turn.
Yeah, or even on the Tramplers, right? It's punching through damage. We were all pretty high on this card during preview season, so I'm glad to see that it's making its way into the decks. I am not super high on Leafkin Druid. I can understand why Marleaf Rider might not be the most appealing because the 1 toughness can be a liability. And there aren't too many options in the 2-drop slot. But I don't know, like, the deck has some monosinks with Sauroform Hybrid, Rosethorn Halberd, a 4-drop and a 5-drop. So I can see the Leafkin Druid being okay if you like curve out with it. But drawing it late just seems so bad. Like, for an aggro deck to just draw
a
0-power creature, it's like you're playing 25 lands in your deck, right? And I think that's something that the aggro decks they want to protect themselves from that. So I would for sure play the 4th Sandwalla over any amount of Leafkin Druids. And then maybe even just play more 1-drops. Like, Sedge Green has no shortage of quality 1-drops, and I think that Sedge Scorpion could very easily make its way into the main deck.
I think Snare Spinner will probably be a good option as well, just because of all the flyers.
Yeah, I would not be upset about having a copy or 2 of Snare Spinner in the main deck. Or even just like fleshing out kind of the top of your curve. Maybe playing 2 Leafkin Druids and then like, the 4th 4-drop. Right, because Leafkin Druid is good when you curve it into your big fat spells. So I wouldn't be upset at maybe 2 Leafkin Druids in the deck, but I am not a huge fan of that card. But other than that, like, this list, it's been very refined. JP has been playing this for like 3 seasons now. He's got his sideboard package, Healer of the Glade, Return to Nature, Snare Spinner, very good against the white aggro decks. Prized Unicorn is something that this was Eric's number 1 card for our M20 preview season, and it has seen very little play, but it does seem like the Mirror Breaker, right? If you're just like both building up giant boards, then Prized Unicorn will punch through. Something that I would love to see in his sideboard would be something like this guy, Brightwood Tracker. right? For against the decks that are just trying to like kill all your stuff.
Yeah.
Right. This one allows you to have something that can give you a way to get card advantage later in the game. So the kill all your stuff deck is the deck that came in first this week and the previous week. So something I think that these aggro decks need to find a way to at least have a good sideboard plan against the decks that are just a pile of removal and a bunch of value creatures. Not sure what exactly their best line of approach is going to be, but something like Vivian's Grizzly or the Brightwood Tracker might be worth considering. Other than that, I think it might just be trying to go under them. What do you think this deck can do?
For some reason, I was thinking, I don't know. I was looking at Wrecking Beast.
7 mana is a lot, but it might just do the trick if they're not holding up Murder.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. But definitely those. Oh, what's that one creature? What was that one creature again? The Brightwood Tracker. Yeah, I say it's a good option.
Yeah, it is a little slow. Like you play it, they have a pretty big window to kill it before you can activate it, and even if you do activate it, like you're probably gonna spend your whole turn doing that. So I don't know if it's like
maybe like a
great plan against them, but
it's hard because there's Sapling Migration was really good against the control decks too, because then like you needed 2 removal spells to answer the 2 tokens.
Yeah, and there just really isn't an option similar to that anymore.
Or you can put, I think there's like an alligator that has hexproof.
Oh, the 5 mana 5/3 hexproof guy.
Yes.
Yeah, that guy might be worth playing. Boom, Ward Scale Crocodile.
So then you just put, I would say 2 copies of those.
Mm-hmm. Something to think about, but we saw Jansen beat JP in the finals, and then Jansen beat you in the end boss match playing the same deck.
Yeah.
So that blue-black control deck really has a great matchup against these tiny little aggro decks. Yeah, the artifacts don't really give you many options here as well. Okay, but congratulations to JP. Let's take a look at the first place deck. Jansen did not change a single card from his deck.
This is his third tournament finish.
Yeah, this is his third tournament win in a row. Was he using the exact same deck in the first tournament?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so this is the boogeyman of the format right now. The kids were kind of asking like, how do you beat mono white or like white aggro because it was so much of the metagame, and I think that this is your answer, right? General rule of thumb in Magic is that if you are trying to beat a specific deck, you either want to go way under it, meaning you want to be much, much smaller than it
and faster,
or you want to and kill it before it's able to get its stuff online, or you want to be just a little bit bigger than it. So this deck is really good at being just a little bit bigger than the mono white decks, right? They're playing a whole bunch of 1-drops, a whole bunch of 2-drops, and then a couple 3s, a couple 4s. This deck is playing efficient removal on 1 and 2 to make sure it doesn't fall behind, and then starts taking over the game with its 3 and 4 mana spells. So this deck is just a really good, clear example of trying to be a slightly bigger deck than the most popular deck in the format, right? So this sits nicely on top of mono white aggro. It sits nicely on top of mono green aggro, and it has proven successvel against those archetypes. So if we see more people pick up this archetype in the future, then that is when it's this deck, if it has to start dedicating slots to fighting the mirror match. Because in the mirror match, the most important cards are stuff like Devious Cover-Up, Didn't Say Please, Soul Salvage, like the slow cards that allow you to get an advantage over a long period of time. Mm-hmm. If it has to start increasing the number of those that it's playing, then it's going to be able to play less spot removal, right? Spot removal is really bad in the mirror matches, but that's what gives it a good game against the aggro decks. So if more people start picking up these mid-range decks, we're going to start seeing a really interesting metagame dance where the mid-range decks need to figure out what they want to beat. But, if Jansen is just continuing to be the only mid-range player in the tournaments, then I think he's just going to continue to have really good matchups against the aggro decks. Now, so I think moving forward, one option is to pick up this deck. The next level of option would be to pick up the deck that has a good matchup against this, which I don't have it built here, but I do have an MTG Goldfish. Here. So this deck, I was playing blue-red control a lot last season. Let's just export this. And one of the things that blue-red control was good at was beating up on the other blue decks. And the reason it was able to do that is because it just played fewer creatures. It played more card advantage, right? Winged Word, Hypothesizzle, the 4 Izzet Locket. And then this particular build doesn't play very much main deck counter magic. I think it's actually the same amount that Jansen is playing. But, having more card draw means that you're more likely to find it. And whereas Jansen is playing more creatures, the creatures just aren't going to be very good against against another deck that just has a ton of removal. So this blue-red list is something that I would recommend if you want to have a good matchup against the mid-range decks, right? You just make your deck a little bit bigger, right? Remember, the general rule of thumb is that the deck that is slightly bigger than its opponent's deck is going to win, right? Jansen's deck had a lot of 3-drops, and then this deck is playing a lot of 4s and 5s, right? Izzet Locket kind of counts as like a 4-mana spell because you got to pay 4 to pop it to draw a card. So still playing the cheap removal to not die to the aggro decks, but then playing like more late game cards to just win the card advantage game against the other mid-range decks. So this deck, it probably has a slightly worse aggro matchup than the mid-range deck, but it
has a good matchup against the mid-range deck.
Yeah, exactly. So I would love to see the metagame shift a little bit, right? We've seen lots of aggro decks. We've seen a natural foil to the aggro decks emerge. I would love to see people starting to adapt. I understand the appeal of wanting to just like pick up a deck and stick with it, which you'll have a certain amount of success doing that because you'll be able to play that deck very well. But if you really want to make sure that you do well in a specific tournament, namely the scholarship tournament, right, the one that's worth the most, then you need to have your finger on the pulse of the metagame and make sure that you're adapting to the decks that you're seeing becoming popular. So
also my thing is you need to, I guess if you're gonna pick up a deck like control or any control, you have to understand, I guess there's more thinking involved in than an aggro deck. It's just basically you slap a whole bunch of creatures down and you just attack. But
I don't know if I would say it's more thinking. It's a different type of thinking.
It's a different type of thinking. Yeah. It's more strategic because then you need to prioritize which creatures you're like, okay, I'll let this creature slide, but which threats is more of a priority, so then you'll prioritize more of your removal spells for those particular threats.
Right. The questions that you're asking yourself when playing a control deck are different than the questions you're asking yourself when you're playing an aggro deck. So when you're playing an aggro deck, you're asking yourself, what is the most efficient way for me to pressure my opponent right now?
Yes.
Right? That's almost always the question that you're asking yourself when you're playing an aggro deck. When you're playing a control deck, you're asking yourself, what is the best way for me to not die right now, right? And that often takes the form of like choosing which spell to use to answer which of your opponent's threats, right? Which spells do you need to save because you think your opponent is going to play certain threats later. So you're asking yourself different questions, and it also rewards you for
your decisions.
being familiar with what your opponent is going to play, right? If you know that your opponent is playing a bunch of really cheap spells, then you'll know to prioritize your removal in a certain way. If you know your opponent has a lot of like 4 toughness creatures, then you want to prioritize your counter spells or your hypothesisal instead of your shocks, right?
Yeah.
So just different things like that. But anytime that you switch decks, you wanna make sure you get a fair amount of practice in with it. But I would recommend looking to the bigger decks in the format if you are tired of losing to Jansen.
But I would also say like what was I gonna say now? I think when you looking at it too, like also being familiar with the cards as well, in cards that are being played in the format, because then like during the tournament, I was watching I think it was Skylar. No, it was Jansen versus Jace. And because Jansen already knew, he played so much mono white aggro, he's expecting particular cards to come out. So then he's already thinking a step ahead, like, okay, what if this person plays Fairy Guide Mother on Adventure? He already has an idea what to do to answer those particular situations. So like I think also not just familiarizing yourself with the deck that you're using, but also familiarize yourself with the cards that are being used in the metagame. So because white shares such a big shares a big piece of the metagame pie, I think it is easier for him to kind of navigate what can I do to optimize the game.
Yeah. Anytime that you are preparing for a tournament, you want to be aware of the common played decks and make sure that you are familiar with the lines of play that are going to come up over and over again against them, so that you're able to think ahead in those matchups. You're not having to like reevaluate everything for the first time in the middle of the match. But that's where the Standard Pauper metagame is at right now here in Hawaii. Would love to see the steps that it takes forward, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the metagame evolves. So thank you for stopping by. Where are we? There we are. If you've made it this far, we appreciate you. And once again, if you want to support what we do, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and check out our Patreon page. Anything else?
No. Yeah. We're good.
All right. Well, thanks for stopping by, and I will catch you next time.
Laters.
Peace.